Hello, this is Peter Nielsen, and this is a presentation called The Confluence of Two Rivers, Remediation, Restoration, and Redevelopment at the Milltown Superfund site. It's a two-part presentation, and part one today will discuss the history and the background on the decision to remove the Milltown Dam. The Milltown Reservoir Superfund site is located at the confluence of the Blackfoot and the Clark Fork River, just a few miles upstream of Missoula. Milltown Dam is located here where I'm pointing, and this is the Blackfoot, and this is the Clark Fork. The Milltown Reservoir Superfund site was established in 1983 by the United States Environmental Protection Agency. It's part of a larger Superfund area in the Clark Fork River Basin that extends all the way from Butte and Anaconda down the Clark Fork River to the Milltown Reservoir near Missoula. One of the nation's largest Superfund sites includes such features as the Berkeley Pit in Butte, the Anaconda Smelter, Silverbow Creek, and of course the Clark Fork River and Milltown Dam. Now, tens of thousands of years ago, the confluence of these two rivers was submerged under a large lake, Glacial Lake Missoula. The site is a rich human history that includes Native American trails, commonly known as the Road to the Buffalo, which all converged and entered the Blackfoot River Valley through the Milltown, what's now the Milltown Reservoir site. The site retains particular importance to the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, which have designated treaty rights as a result of the 1855 Hellgate Treaty. This picture is a depiction of the signing of that treaty out at Council Grove, west of Missoula. The tribes remain active in the remediation and restoration plans for the site. The Hellgate Canyon, shown here, looking downstream, here's the Milltown Dam looking down the Clark Fork to Missoula. This Hellgate Canyon was commonly referred to as Ambush Alley, where rival tribes would ambush each other on their way to their trips to the east to hunt the buffalo. The site is also along the route of the return route of Meriwether Lewis in 1806. Actually, July 4th, 1806, Meriwether Lewis and his part of his party passed through what's now the Milltown Reservoir site and camped just a few miles upstream on the Blackfoot. The historic confluence was also the site of a camp called Cantonment Right, the winter encampment of Lieutenant John Mullen when he was building the military road from Fort Benton to Walla Walla. This is the Blackfoot River here. These men are walking on ice that's formed on the river, and this is the military road bridge across the Blackfoot, near where the Highway 200 bridge is today. Here's the Clark Fork River. This is a lithograph from Lieutenant Mullen's report to Congress on the construction of the military road. And this is an old government land office map that shows how this area looked before the Milltown Dam was built. About in 1906, William Andrews Clark, one of the copper kings from Butte, decided to build a dam at the confluence of these two rivers to power a lumber mill, which he had located near present-day Bonner, to provide timbers and fuel for his mines and smelters in Butte. And this is a photograph showing the construction of that dam. Here is where the spillway is located today, and here's where the powerhouse is now located. And you can see here's the bypass channel where they directed flow around their construction site, and they brought a lot of their materials in with horses and carts. When the dam was built, it was pretty much viewed as an engineering marvel at the time. It was certainly the best technology of the time, and it was a big deal for our community to have this dam built. And it was chronicled in the local newspaper, the Missoulian, in this fashion. When the last piece of timber is added to the dam, it'll be in such condition that the highest waters ever known in this vicinity will not affect it in the least. No expense was spared in making the dam one of the strongest of its kind. The dam was completed and filled in January of 1908. 5 months later, after a period of several weeks of rain on top of snow, the water came up in the Clark Fork to a height that we've never seen before. It was the highest flood on record in the Clark Fork, the 1908 flood. And during that flood, the powerhouse was submerged under 6 feet of flood water. Those who observed the flood felt that there was still no danger of the dam being damaged by it. There is no more danger of the power dam going out than there is of the mountains washing down the river. The dam is as firm and solid as it can be, said Charles Marsh on June 7th, 1908. But the flood had other plans for the Milltown Dam, and by the end of June, Waymay Clark's Milltown Dam was in shambles. The entire left third of the spillway had been washed out by the flood, and the entire toe of the spillway was also washed out. In this photograph, you can see the construction techniques of the time. It's a timber crib structure, 10 by 10 timbers filled with rocks. And that's still what's there today, although it has been substantially upgraded over time, including 2.5 feet of concrete now on the face of the spillway. That 1908 flood not only damaged the Milltown Dam, but it carried a great deal of sediment downstream from the headwaters and deposited it in the Milltown Reservoir. And much of what was deposited in the 1908 flood is still there today. The problem is that the folks that were mining and smelting in Butte in the late 1800s and early 1900s were not very careful with how they disposed of their wastes. They generated a great deal of waste at the smelters and the refining facilities in Butte. And these are a few pictures that show these facilities. These pictures were taken by the Deer Lodge Valley ranchers who actually sued to try to stop this practice of discharging waste directly into Silverbow Creek and onto the banks of Silverbow Creek, where it was being transported down into the irrigation works in the Deer Lodge Valley. Ultimately, the ranchers were unsuccessful in stopping this process, but there was huge amounts of material deposited along the creek. And this is 1906 when these pictures were taken. 2 years later, the flood came and transported this stuff downstream, and that's what we ended up with here at Milltown Dam. Now, this photograph is an aerial photo showing the headwaters of the Clark Fork River. Here is the Berkeley Pit, Silverbow Creek, Warm Springs Ponds, and the Opportunity Tailings Ponds near the Anaconda Smelter. The amount of devastation and the amount of degradation of the environment that's been perpetrated on the environment here is huge and can never be entirely reversed. But what we're trying to do in places like Milltown, Silverbow Creek cleanup is get the waste out of contact with the river, out of contact with the water, and away from people. That same flood that brought material downstream deposited a great deal of material along Silverbow Creek itself and along the Clark Fork River. These banks, shown in these photographs, are comprised almost entirely of mine tailings that contain arsenic, copper, cadmium, lead, and zinc in fairly high concentrations. And these banks can be 10, 20 feet in height in places. So the amount of material is just huge that's been deposited along the streams all the way down to Missoula. This man is standing upon a riverbank that is comprised of mine tailings, and it's eroding, as you can see, into the creek as the river flows by. He's standing next to this dead vegetation. And these are dead willows that were probably killed in the 1908 flood itself, and the reason that they have not degraded and gone away is that the tailings are so acidic that you can't even get bacteria to grow, and the bacteria populations can't decompose that woody material. Here in the Deer Lodge Valley, you can find these point bars, these areas of mine tailings and mine slickens. You see the bluish green color on the mine tailings that are still exposed in the floodplain. And if you go out onto these areas, you can find dead animal bones with copper salts precipitated onto them. So it just gives you an idea of this magnitude of the problem that's being addressed. And the cleanup is progressing down Silverbow Creek and will soon also be progressing down the Clark Fork River through the Deer Lodge Valley. Through most of the rest of the century, the Milltown Dam operated. It became a fixture in the community of Bonner. The community began to identify itself in part with its industrial base. And William A. Clark had a streetcar that ran trips into Missoula, developed a riverside park out near the Milltown Dam where they had dances. People would come out and swim in the reservoir. And it was pretty much a fixture in the local community and something that was important to people. But, you know, things like this would happen every few years, and this is a picture taken in the late 1960s when the river ran red from the iron in the water. If you have this much iron in the water, a good chance you have a lot of other metals there too, like the arsenic and copper that kill the fish. And this gave people a hint that maybe there was something wrong with their water, and they knew that they had a problem. And in fact, there was a quote in the story from the story of Bonner. Mildred Dufresne said that water practically surrounds Milltown, and yet it's always been a problem. There's only one good well, and there were a few other wells which did not have very good water. It was thought that they were contaminated by the copper mine residue-laden waters of the Clark Fork River. So folks had an idea that there was something wrong with their water. They knew it might have something to do with copper. What they didn't know is that there was arsenic. And it really wasn't until 1981 when arsenic was found in the water supply at Milltown. And this is Ed Zulager, who is a sanitarian with the Missoula City County Health Department, who went out and collected the first samples in 1981 that found contamination of water in Milltown. At first it was thought it was a mistake. There couldn't be arsenic in the water at Milltown. It's a town with a small plywood mill, and they don't use arsenic to make plywood, so where would it be coming from? So Ed was sent back actually to take repeat samples, assuming that the first were in error. When the second samples came back with even more arsenic than the first, folks began to realize, well, maybe we have a real problem here. Where's it coming from? Eventually, the tie was made to the reservoir itself and to the mining activities in the headwaters here at the Anaconda Smelter, the Berkeley Pit, and sampling them eventually was done in the sediment itself to find that there was in fact arsenic in the sediment and leaching into groundwater, and the site was ultimately designated as a Superfund site then by the EPA in 1983, and a replacement water system installed for the first wells that were affected by 1985. Superfund process takes a long, long time, and there's a lot of documents and a lot of arduous process to it. And it was all the way from 1983 till 1996. And at that point, in February of 1996, the EPA was prepared to announce its decision about what to do with the Milltown Dam. And the decision was going to be to leave the dam and the sediments in place, to restrict well drilling in the area surrounding the contaminated aquifer plume under the reservoir and the neighboring community. And that was going to be it. And in fact, it was going to be the next week that February, this is a picture here taken on February 9th of 1996. And the next week, EPA was prepared to announce this decision. But what happened shook things up quite a bit. There was an ice event that flowed out of the Blackfoot, an ice flow that came down the Blackfoot, running at about 10 miles an hour, 10 miles long, and about 10 feet high, taking out bridges and knocking houses off of their foundations, snapping off ponderosa pine trees like toothpicks, and heading down the Blackfoot down to the Milltown Dam. And of course, the operator of the Milltown Dam was at that time Montana Power Company. They were very concerned what might happen to their dam if this ice flow came down and hit it. So there was an emergency drawdown done, and they drew the reservoir down by 8 feet very quickly and ground that ice to a halt. But in the process, there was a tremendous amount of sediment scoured out of the reservoir, and you can see the color of the water in these pictures is pretty dirty. And what happened was that a lot of sediments came out, and we found the next year, thanks to our Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks, that this event was responsible for killing a lot of fish in the river downstream. Anywhere from 60 to 86% of the trout populations downstream all the way to the Bitterroot were impacted by the copper. How copper kills fish is it gets into their gills and irritates them, and the fish secrete a mucus to protect themselves. And if there's too much copper, they secrete too much mucus and they essentially suffocate. So that shook things up, and EPA decided to look at the issue again, not to announce their final decision, and decided to try to do something different, look at the issues of dam removal. Missoula County asked them to look more carefully at cleanup and dam removal options. In the next few years, a number of other things happened which all kind of piled up and led to the decision to remove the dam, one of which there's fish issues, a number of fish issues. Fish passage, of course, is still blocked by this dam. This is a picture at the base of the spillway. There's a dark shadow there, and that's fish. That's not a shadow. There's as many as 30,000 fish congregating at the base of this dam every year and still trying to get upstream to spawn. Another thing that happened is that this fish, the bow trout, was listed as a threatened species under the Endangered Species Act. And the Milltown Dam was classified as taking of an endangered species or threatened species. And that started to cost Montana Power Company a lot of money in terms of mitigation for that impact. Finally, the northern pike, this fish, was introduced into the reservoir. Actually, it was introduced into the chain of lakes up in the Sealy Swan area, and they came downstream into the reservoir, took up habitat there in that shallow, warm breeding habitat, and their population started to grow dramatically. And pretty soon, the only place you could find a bull trout in the Milltown Reservoir was in the stomach of a northern pike. So the fish issues became a big problem for Montana Power and this dam. Other issues that came up included dam safety issues. And in 2001, Missoula County became aware that there was leakage occurring in the Milltown Dam, and this information had been pretty much kept from the county and the EPA and all the Montana agencies as well by the power company and the Federal Energy Regulatory Commission. So we were all pretty shocked because everybody assumed that if the dam was going to stay in place forever, everything could be fine and the sediment could stay there. But when we began to realize maybe we had some structural problems with this dam, you know, that we didn't have that confidence that the dam would be there forever, just a few miles upstream of our city. A couple years later, more serious problems were found with the spillway. There was a 77-foot-long void found in the crest, and that's a third of the length of the crest of the spillway, and the void was 10 feet wide and about 18 inches deep. So that was a big problem. That's not the kind of thing you really want to see in your spillway, is a big empty space. Again, the construction methods of the time were modern in 1908, but they're not modern today. 10 by 10 timbers filled with rock aggregate, in places built on bedrock and in places built on the loose gravel deposits that are in the riverbed. So it's not the most stable environment for a dam to be built, nor the most stable techniques. This is a picture from the UM archives showing a cross-section of the dam. You can see that it's built on bedrock here at the crest, but as you go down along the toe, it's built on this loose rock deposit. As it turns out, over the years, a lot of that material has eroded and been moved out of there, and the dam has settled, and that settlement continues unabated. So these structural problems became a big issue in the discussions about what to do with the dam. Missoula County hired an engineer to look at the dam safety and found that, made a number of findings, including that the safety factors for the spillway, the radial gate, the right abutment were all less than 1.0, which basically means they're unstable. The conclusion of our consultant was that if we had a large earthquake, it could trigger cracking, settling, ultimately erosion and dam failure, and that even normal loads on the spillway day to day may be close to the resistance of the structure, which can explain in part the settlements and the cracks and the leaks and the voids that we were observing. The conclusion was that the spillway, if the dam's going to stay in place, the spillway would have to be really repaired or replaced, and that would cost at least $40 or $50 million. So suddenly the option of leaving the dam in place was not such a good deal for ARCO and Northwestern Energy. Other conclusions that we had: the Milltown Dam did not meet any of the safety standards for contemporary dams today, would require major repair. It was vulnerable to earthquake damage, floods, and ice events, and the leakage, settlements, and voids are all signs that the dam is marginally stable and in need of major repair if it's going to stay in place, especially if they're going to count on it to hold back 6 million yards of contaminated waste material behind the dam. To make a long story short, in January 21st of 2003, Montana Governor Judy Martz surprised a lot of folks in her State of the State address when she announced that the full support of her office for the removal of the Milltown Dam at Bonner, stating that it was simply the right thing to do. To review, why would this dam be removed? The reasons that EPA has cited for why it's removing this dam include groundwater and surface water pollution, the fisheries issues I talked about briefly, electricity deregulation, and a change in ownership. The Montana legislature deregulated electricity in 1997, and Montana Power ultimately sold this dam to Northwestern Energy. And Northwestern Energy owns no other dams and really was not interested in continuing to own this one, particularly since it lost money. It's not a profitable facility. The dam safety concerns were pivotal, I think, in the decision to remove the dam. And of course, there was strong public support that began to develop in this community for the removal option. And the bottom line is the dam's unprofitable and really provides very little public benefit. An agreement was negotiated under the leadership of John Wardell from the United States Environmental Protection Agency between the United States, the state of Montana, the Confederated Salish and Kootenai tribes, ARCO, and Northwestern. And that consent decree was made effective just last month, April 10th, 2006. This agreement, the consent decree, basically includes negotiated terms and costs for integrating both remediation and restoration at this site. That includes cleanup of the contaminated sediments, removal of the dam, and restoring 2 free-flowing rivers in the site. Effective the date of, just before the effective date of the consent decree on April 7th, Northwestern Energy shut down the power at Milltown Dam for the very last time. And this is a photograph of Bill Thompson, Mike Hankey, and Bill Scarborough out at the dam that day, flipping the last switches to shut down the last generators at the dam. And this is one of those generators as it spun to its final stop at Milltown Dam. The Federal Power Act license for the dam has now been surrendered. It is no longer a hydroelectric facility located at the Confluence. So there appears to be no turning back now. The project is moving forward. This consent decree, this agreement, covers many things, but it calls for how sediment removal, dam removal, restoration, historic preservation, bull trout mitigation, fisheries protection, the Stimson Dam removal, highway mitigation, and reimbursement of past federal costs and future oversight costs are paid for by various parties. ARCO is paying the lion's share of this cleanup. It's not being paid for by taxpayer dollars. It's being paid for by the company that is responsible for the problem. The Superfund program operates under the principle that the polluter pays. In this case, ARCO will pay a total of about $82 million for the cleanup and dam removal here at this site. Northwestern Energy will also contribute to both the remediation and the restoration of the site. And the amount that they'll pay, depending on how long it takes to get the dam out, will be about $12 million. So these are substantial funds. The overall cost is right about $100 million if restoration is included. The final plan had some changes from EPA's revised proposed plan. The construction of the bypass channel will be upgraded to protect against 100-year flows. Previously, it was designed for 25-year flows. Infrastructure protection for bridges and highways is planned because when the reservoir drops, some of those bridge piers and embankments may become unstable. And of course, there will be a lot of additional monitoring above and beyond what was originally planned for fisheries and for water quality as far downstream as Thompson Falls. Again, why did EPA choose this cleanup? It is, in fact, the only permanent option to deal with this site. It will restore a polluted aquifer several hundred acres of aquifer polluted with arsenic. It will eliminate the ice scouring events that kill fish, remove the risk of the dam failing and causing a huge problem downstream, and prevent recontamination after the removal of the sediments in the dam. Ultimately, 2 free-flowing rivers will be reestablished, fisheries will be improved substantially, and the whole project will lay the groundwork for restoration and redevelopment. And this is an artist's conceptual drawing of what the confluence may look like when the project is done. And of course, this is several years after a lot of the vegetation has become mature. Here's the new channel of the Clark Fork, and the new confluence in the Blackfoot, and down here is about where the Milltown Dam is located today. In the next part of this presentation, I'll get into more details of actually how the project will be conducted and when it will happen. But thanks for your time. Bye-bye. This is part 2 of a presentation called The Confluence of Two Rivers, Remediation, Restoration, and Redevelopment at the Milltown Superfund site. And in this part of the presentation, I'll go into some detail of how this project's going to be done and when. First, let's look at what sediments are going to be removed as part of this project. Now, this is an aerial photo, and just to orient you, this is the location of the Milltown Dam today. This is the Blackfoot River. This is the location of the Bonner Dam, the old Stimson Mill Dam that was removed last fall. And this is the Clark Fork River channel. The sediments that will be removed by the Milltown project are located in the area called Area 1. This red outlined area with the Roman numeral 1. The yellow area is the area that's believed to contribute primarily to the arsenic contamination in the aquifer. So that's the source area for the arsenic problem that the EPA is targeted with this removal project. This is a photograph taken from the bluff up above the dam back in 2002 during a drawdown of the reservoir of about 10 feet. And you can see when you draw this reservoir down, there's not a whole lot of water storage in it because it's filled up with sediment. And this is the Area 1 sediments right here that I'm pointing to that will be removed as part of this project. These are the most heavily contaminated sediments in the reservoir, and much of which came down in the original 1908 flood that transported all that waste down from Silverbow Creek. Sediments in here down at the bottom are maybe 20, 25 feet in thickness, and at the upper end of this area, maybe less than that, 5 feet in thickness. So that's what's going to be the target of the removal of the project. This is a photograph from that same perspective, looking up the Blackfoot, looking at the bridges, interstate highway bridges, Highway 200, etc. And there's some other sediments over here that are primarily Blackfoot River sediments, and those will not be removed as part of this project. But the sediments in this Blackfoot River channel, some of that will be eroded downstream during the dam drawdowns. This is a conceptual model of the proposed cleanup plan at the Milltown Reservoir site. Again, to orient you, it's kind of an aerial view, and this is the Milltown Dam site today. This is the Blackfoot River, and this is the Clark Fork River channel today. Ultimately, when we're all done, there'll be a new river channel for the Clark Fork restored, and it'll be approximately along this sinuous course right here. A couple of important things to point out to you on this diagram include a bypass channel. And the bypass channel is something that we fought long and hard for to make this project work well without impacting us downstream. And the bypass channel would be built through this area between these two purple lines up near against the interstate. We'll start up at the upper end of the reservoir about a mile upstream where the old Milwaukee Railroad Bridge went across, and go down and flow into the Blackfoot River. So it won't bypass the dam, but it will bypass these contaminated sediments. And the plan is to lower the reservoir by 10 feet in stage 1 of the project, and then construct this bypass channel before we do any more lowering of the reservoir. and put the river then into this bypass channel before the dam is removed, so we won't have uncontrolled scouring and erosion of these contaminated sediments downstream. Something else I want to show you on this picture is this green line, which represents a new rail spur to be built right out onto the reservoir sediments themselves. They'll be building a rail spur and hauling sediments from this area by train. Now this figure shows how water levels will change at the reservoir over time. On this bottom axis, it starts with June '06 and goes all the way over to December 2009. And on this axis, we have the water surface elevation in the reservoir. And right today, it starts at about 3,261 feet above sea level. That's full pool in the Milltown Reservoir. In June, after the peak of spring runoff, the reservoir will start to gradually decline. And it will take a period of time until really late July or even August before it's able to get down, but they'll remove it, they'll let it come down gradually, and it'll ultimately be down about 10 feet by August or September of this year. And during that time period, which will extend until October of 2007, the reservoir will stay down, although it will come back up next year in spring runoff. And during that time period, Envirocon is the construction company that's been hired by ARCO to do the work, and they will be installing infrastructure at the site. They'll install that bypass channel that I showed you, the rail spur, containment berms and roads and all those things to get ready to start the project. And that all takes a year and a half to get accomplished, just to get ready to start. During that time frame also, and I'll show you some pictures in a minute, there's going to need to be a lot of work done on the highway bridges on the Blackfoot River. So anyway, that's stage one. Stage one drawdown, 10-foot drawdown, lasting until October of 2007. At that point, then they put the river into the bypass channel and take the reservoir down another 7 feet. They build temporary coffer dams, gravel dams, around the spillway and remove it. And that only takes a period of a few months. And by March of 2008, the spillway would be removed, the coffer dams eroded, and the river would seek then its final elevation, about 29 feet down from its first water elevation where it starts today. So that's a big drop, and that'll occur over a period of about 2 years. And if everything stays on schedule, by this time in 2008, the Milltown Dam spillway would be removed. The sediments will be removed by conventional excavating equipment. The original plan had been to do this with hydraulic dredges with the reservoir full, but Envirocon and ARCO felt that they could do it more economically and practically with the method they've proposed. The removal area would be isolated and protected by a bypass channel, and these sheet pile walls that will interlock and isolate the contaminated sediments from the flowing water nearby. The sediment will be handled by conventional excavating equipment and to be transported by rail up to the Opportunity Tailings Ponds near the old Anaconda smelter near Anaconda. The rail spurs and the loading and unloading facilities will be constructed, and the process will be done with 2 trains per day, one going to Anaconda and one coming back. And they'll operate on 10-hour work days, and I believe the schedule is to have 6-day work weeks on this project. This is an aerial photo showing the Opportunity Tailings Ponds. And just to orient you a little bit, we're heading, this is the interstate highway looking east, as if you're going towards Butte. The Opportunity Tailings Ponds are no longer ponds, they're dry. It's a 3,400-acre area of mine tailings that were generated by the smelting activities at the old Anaconda smelter, which is up here on the hill near Anaconda. So it's often confusing. I think some people think that we're taking these tailings back up to the Warm Springs ponds, which they see from the highway. They'd be on your left side as you're driving towards Butte, but that's not where they're going. They're going to the Opportunity Tailings Ponds, which have no water in them now, over near the community of Opportunity in Anaconda. So it's between Anaconda and the Warm Springs Hospital, basically. This is another photograph that shows the Opportunity ponds in the background and the community of Opportunity in the foreground. And of course, these folks that live there are understandably concerned about what's going on up there, and they've been very concerned about the presence of all this waste in their backyard, all the dust, airborne materials that they have to breathe when the wind blows. So they're very involved in this decision as well. The dam would actually be removed by first building temporary gravel dams, these coffer dams. And those are shown in red on this little diagram. So this diagram shows here these temporary coffer dams. This is the spillway of the Milltown Dam, and this is the powerhouse and the right abutment. The river flow is flowing from the top to the bottom of this picture through the spillway. These temporary gravel dams essentially allow you to de-water your work environment so that you can go in there and remove the spillway with conventional excavating equipment. Once that's done, down to the approved depth, then they erode the coffer dams, and the river seeks its new elevation, and the dam's removed. So that's how it's done. No explosives, just a conventional excavating equipment. Recovery of the drinking water supply out of Milltown was one of the primary goals of this whole project, and it's something that we talk about a great deal. How this will happen, there's essentially three important elements of how this is done. The arsenic source, the reservoir sediments themselves, are physically removed from the floodplain. That's very important. The next thing is those sediments that remain, and not all the sediments are to be removed, but those that remain are no longer submerged underwater. They're no longer in an environment that lacks oxygen. And so with oxygen present, the main geochemical release mechanism for arsenic mobility ends. For some reason, in the lack of oxygen, in the lack of presence of oxygen, arsenic is more mobile. And so we have a combination of that with the hydraulic head driving the water down into the sediments into the aquifer. So if you remove the dam, you no longer have that hydraulic head, that 29 feet of water pressure forcing water through those sediments, picking up the arsenic and driving them into the aquifer down below. So the flow is substantially reduced into the aquifer. So just physically, the plume of underground aquifer shrinks with the loss of the hydraulic head. And then the prediction is that the arsenic concentration in groundwater would decrease over time. ARCO has estimated that it could occur as quickly as 4 years after the cleanup project is done, and EPA says about 10 years. So those are just predictions, but that's what's anticipated. Could removal make it worse? This has been a big topic of discussion, and these are quotes from a letter from John Wardell to a water utility here in Missoula back in 2002, saying that they expect no impacts to groundwater that would pose a threat to human health, but EPA is committed to mitigate any impacts that threaten human health which arise by the implementation of the remedy at the site. So this commitment has now been made formal not only by letter but also through the consent decree process, and ARCO is actually now legally bound to deal with these problems. So that's one advantage of having this assigned agreement. So nonetheless, although we don't predict these impacts to occur, we need to have an adequate monitoring program to see for sure. And there is going to be a very strong, robust monitoring program both during and after the cleanup project. It'll be both short-term and long-term, primarily for surface water and groundwater at the site. This map shows the three main surface water monitoring stations. Here's the Confluence, where the Milltown Dam is located. This is the Blackfoot. One of the monitoring stations is upstream on the Blackfoot. And this is the Clark Fork. The other is up at the Tura Bridge station up near Tura. The downstream point of compliance is 2.8 miles downstream of the dam at the East Missoula gauge, Clark Fork above Missoula. So that's where the surface water monitoring will be done. and it will be for sediments, metals, and a variety of other parameters. And when things are happening, and when the river's muddy, the monitoring will be done daily, and the turnaround time will be daily as well. So it's a pretty quick turnaround project. The groundwater, of course, is a big problem out there. It's 350 acres of area that is polluted by arsenic in groundwater. And this shows the boundaries of that arsenic plume. Again, to orient you, this is an aerial photo. Here's the Milltown Dam. Here's the Blackfoot River and the Clark Fork River, and flowing downstream towards Missoula in this direction. The yellow line is the approximate boundaries of the plume of arsenic pollution under the groundwater, in the groundwater. Just a few facts about arsenic at Milltown. The reservoir sediments are estimated to have 2,100 tons of arsenic. There's actually 105 pounds per day of arsenic discharged to the aquifer, according to Bill Wisner, a professor at the university who did an assessment report back in 1995. That's 19 tons of arsenic every year discharged into the headwaters of the Missoula aquifer. So some folks have suggested, well, when you remove the dam, you're going to pollute the aquifer. And of course, removing the dam and cleaning it up is the purpose of that is to clean up the aquifer. We're polluting the aquifer now. And in no small measure. I mean, these are large numbers. This is a lot of arsenic coming into the groundwater. That's why we're doing this project. Back in 1981, when pollution was first found in the community wells, arsenic was found in concentrations of 220 to 510 parts per billion. Now, in monitoring wells at the site, even today, arsenic is as high as 1,100 parts per billion. The new federal drinking water standard is 10 parts per billion. So that kind of puts it in perspective. This is not just a minor source of pollution. It's a big source of pollution, and it's by far the largest source of largest plume of groundwater that we have in Missoula County, and it's polluted with arsenic, which is known to cause cancer and other disease in people, in human populations. It's actually classified, arsenic is, as a known human carcinogen by EPA and the International Agency for Research on Cancer. Known to cause a variety of forms of cancer: skin, bladder, lung, liver, kidney, and prostate cancer. And this is known to cause an increased rate of cancer in human populations in different continents all around the world. It's actually not known, the science is not conclusive for lab rats, but it's conclusive for people, which is the opposite of most toxic substances that we study. So it's kind of a big deal and a big human health threat out there that we have. The National Academy of Sciences actually recommended a lower arsenic standard than was adopted by the Bush administration a number of years ago. That standard became effective in January of this year. It's 10 parts per billion. But at 10 parts per billion, there's roughly a 3 in 1,000 increased risk of cancer. Other chemical standards that we have in the United States is a 1 in 100,000 increased risk. So they've been a little bit more lenient on arsenic, and that's due to the big cost of cleaning it up and dealing with it in public water systems. Anyway, back to monitoring. Monitoring of groundwater is very important out at the Milltown site, and this figure shows the location of the monitoring wells that would be used to monitor water quality during the project. These include early warning wells, compliance wells, and public health monitoring wells, including existing public water systems like the Bonner School, the churches, trailer courts out there, public water systems even downstream along the Clark Fork, like Sunny Meadows and Eastview over in East Missoula, etc. The monitoring wells extend all the way downstream into Missoula in areas where Mountain Water Company has wells that may be affected, and all the way down to McCormick Park. So that's the heart of the monitoring program, and some of those wells will be monitored once per year, twice per year, some 4 times per year, and then up to a frequency of up to once every 2 weeks if certain levels are exceeded in the aquifer. Now in the river downstream, there's been a concern that the sediments released by the dam will cause pollution in the river that will translate into pollution in the aquifer down in Missoula. And I just put this together to kind of put it in perspective. In 2002, we had a drawdown of 10 feet, and it was heavily monitored. And arsenic never got much above 10 in the river at that time, during that drawdown. In 1996, the arsenic levels that occurred during the ice jam were much higher. We got up to close to 100 parts per billion. And so that's the kind of event that causes the big pollution spikes. This 2002 drawdown, by the way, is the same type of drawdown that we'll initiate this summer with the, in preparation for the project to begin installing the bypass channel. Now, of course, in this case, it's going to go on for a longer period of time and go over the winter, so there are some differences. Nonetheless, it's important to realize that this has been monitored, and we have a basis for these predictions that we don't believe that arsenic's going to cause a problem downstream. Even so, there'll be an intense monitoring program to show what's happening. This is a figure put together by the EPA that addresses sediment loads associated with the project. And again, just to show, 1996 is here, 1997. This is the ice scour event in 96, the high flow event, a 10-year flood event in 1990. Let me go back to that. Uh-oh. Okay, you're going to have to edit this for me. Okay. Back to it. 1996 is when the ice scour event occurred, and sediment loads were fairly high. In 1997, we had a 10-year flow event that created even higher sediment loads coming down the river. The predictions, the modeling that's been done for this project predict that the sediment release that will occur will be in that same magnitude of what occurred in 1996 and 1997. So it's something that the river's used to dealing with just from a sediment standpoint. But again, that's just a model, just a prediction, and we will have intensive monitoring to show what actually occurs. And there'll be contingency plans to deal with this problem if it occurs, if it exceeds what we predict. Okay, moving on, the next element in the project is the site restoration. The restoration plan has been prepared under the leadership of the state of Montana, the Natural Resource Damage Program, and the Department of Fish, Wildlife, and Parks. Other natural resource trustees that have been responsible for the plan include the Fish and Wildlife Service and the Salish and Kootenai tribes. In this case, on this project, restoration is actually integrated right into the remediation plan, so that when they go out there and do the remediation, restoration follows up immediately, and it's all put together in a sensible package so that it can be done efficiently. This is a picture of what the river channel may look like through the site when we're done. Here's the confluence of the two rivers. The Milltown Dam is located here. This is the Blackfoot Channel, and this is where the new Clark Fork Channel will wind its way through the floodplain when we're done. And these little areas conceptually show off-stream wetlands that would be associated with the project and constructed. Here's the current Clark Fork River channel over on the south side of the reservoir today. So it's pretty exciting. You don't ever get much of a chance like this to take out a dam, remove a big pollution source, and then restore natural resources as close as we can to baseline condition and restore free-flowing rivers. It's a huge opportunity and something that will be a real showcase for Missoula to be able to say that we're proud that we've done this here. Another aspect of the restoration plan is removal of this dam. This is the dam located behind the Stimson Mill on the Blackfoot River, and this is a picture taken several years ago. But this dam actually was removed in the fall of 2005. Here's a photograph of what that dam looked like back in the late 1800s. It was a pretty substantial facility, produced some power, and provided a pool, a reservoir, in which they could float logs down the Blackfoot and raft them up and bring them into the mill. That was the primary purpose of the dam. The dam had outlived its purpose and was, as you could see from that previous picture, was sagging and having some structural deficiencies. When the Milltown Dam was removed, the concern was that this dam would fall into the river and create a liability, so it needed to be removed up front. This is a picture taken in October of last year when the project began to remove the Stimson or the Bonner Dam, which incidentally was built by a partnership that included Marcus Daly, one of William A. Clark's adversaries, one of the other copper kings from Butte. Anyway, this dam was removed back in 2005. This photograph shows the beginning of the project. This one shows the removal underway, about halfway across the spillway. This excavator is removing the old timber cribs and the rock fill from the dam from a barge located right next to or right below the dam. And this photograph shows what it looked like on the day that the project was just about complete. They're finishing some work over here on this north bank in this project, in this photograph here. The dam was located here, and you can see it's completely gone in this photograph. So that's pretty exciting. Now the river is free-flowing all the way beyond the mill, behind the mill, up the Blackfoot, and when both dams are out, it'll be free-flowing for fish and for people, upstream and downstream. Tremendous change. Remediation, restoration, and redevelopment. We call that the 3 R's, and they're all integrated into this plan. Redevelopment is some of the most exciting parts of this plan, and really the fun part. And it's where we start to think about what can we do with this site when we're all done? How can we turn this into an asset for the community? And the Missoula County Commissioners formed a group called the Redevelopment Working Group back in 2003. There's about 22 community members that are part of that group, very diverse group that covers pretty much all ends of the spectrum. It's been supported by EPA, the county, and the Department of Interior, and that group has developed a redevelopment plan for the site and the surrounding area. The group is also, in the county, has been successful in receiving some funding to implement part of that plan. Some of that funding came thanks to Senator Baucus, who was able to obtain some funding through the federal transportation bill for some of the transportation-related projects that we proposed. That includes extension of trails, pedestrian footbridges, and river access site improvements in that area. This is a diagram that shows the redevelopment conceptual plan. This was done by the group a couple of summers ago. And to orient you again, this is where the Milltown Dam is located today. This is the Blackfoot River. And here's the new channel of the Clark Fork. The river's flowing downstream here towards Missoula. The plan includes, the basic premise of the plan is to convert all the lands out there that are owned by Northwestern Energy into public ownership and establish it as a publicly owned park. To extend trails and loop trails through footbridges out to the area from Missoula all the way up to Tura and up to the way station access on the Blackfoot. And to construct a unique and exciting interpretive center right here at the confluence of the two rivers to tell the story of this place, the natural history, the geologic history, the Native American history, and of course the recent human history that includes the construction and the removal of this dam. Some of the funding that we've received, as I mentioned, came from Senator Baucus through the transportation bill. We've also gotten some additional dollars from the United States Environmental Protection Agency and are requesting dollars from the state natural resource damage program. And all that money will go together to extend an exciting trail network out in the area. Today, the Kim Williams Trail comes up through Missoula and ends right about here. And we'll be connecting that trail system to a trail that's being built around an 18-hole golf course being built here in the Bandon Flats. That Kim Williams Trail will also be extended out to the reservoir area, along the river and along near the railroad right-of-way, out to the dam, ultimately through the tunnel, through the reservoir site, through over another footbridge, and then you'll be able to go all the way up the Blackfoot to the way station river access site, up to the Tura river access site. There'll be a loop trail built here. and then back through town, across the pedestrian footbridge on the Blackfoot, through West Riverside, down to the dam, another segment coming through East Missoula down to the Sharon River access site. Altogether, more than 20 miles of new pedestrian trail and 2 new pedestrian bridges and 1 replacement pedestrian bridge. These are very exciting developments. This segment of trail in pink will be built in 2006. The yellow, the green, and the purple will all be built in 2007. This blue line here and here will be built after that, about 2008 to 2009. And we have money in hand for this work now, so it's very exciting that we've been able to pull this off. The Interpretive Center is another exciting aspect of the project, and we've begun to raise funds for this Interpretive Center as well. And we're currently working with Northwestern on salvaging some of the items from the dam and its powerhouse for interpretive display at the site. What happens next? The very next thing to happen starts in June 2006. That's when the project officially begins with what's known as the Stage 1 drawdown, that first 10-foot drawdown that will take place starting in June and will be down 10 feet maybe by August. During this time frame, starting this fall, all of the bridges on the Blackfoot have to be mitigated to deal with potential impacts from the river as the reservoir is drawn down. So that'll start this fall. The bypass and rail spur construction will start late this fall, early winter. The Milltown Dam would be actually removed in early 2008. The sediment removal and backfill would take place in 2008 to 2009, and the channel restoration would occur in 2008 to 2010. Our redevelopment projects would begin this year with some of the trail work that's being done and extend through at least 2010. So that's roughly the schedule, starting now. This is a photograph of the Interstate 90 bridges showing these piers that are in the center of the river. These piers were built when there was a reservoir in place. They need to be extended deeper in order to create stability, and so there's a plan that's been developed to do that, and they'll start work on stabilizing the embankments and extending the piers this fall, extending through next fall of 2007. During next summer of 2007, they'll actually have to close 1 lane of the interstate at a time. So you'll have 1 bridge open with 1 lane traffic each way for 6 weeks at a time for a total of 3 months. So that's a major disruption. But once that's done, it'll be done, and the work will be complete. We'll also be working on the railroad bridges and the Highway 200 bridge upstream. And then this bridge is owned by Missoula County. This is the Bonner pedestrian bridge, known in the local community as the Black Bridge. And this bridge is going to become unsafe and unstable when the reservoir is drawn down. So the county has proposed and has begun to raise funds for removal and replacement of this bridge by the fall of 2007. This is the location, aerial photo showing the location of the bridge. Here's the Milltown Dam, the Blackfoot River, and this is where the bridge is, and the Bonner Dam was up here behind the mill. The current plans for replacing the bridge include replacing it with a specifically designed pedestrian bridge, something like this, a truss bridge. It'll have a free span in the center of about 250 feet that'll span the whole river with no piers. And it'll be a nice looking bridge to create a new gateway for entrance to that community. These are a series of 4 photographs that show before and after pictures. The artwork is courtesy of the Clark Fork Coalition. This picture is looking downstream. You're in a boat on the reservoir looking downstream at the Milltown Dam, and they have that rock bluff on the left bank of the river looking downstream. This is what it looks like today and what it may look like when we're done from that same point of view. And again, another one looking from downstream, looking upstream at the Milltown Dam. And here's that rock bluff again over on the south bank of the river. Today and in the future when we're all done. So these are exciting times. A big change is happening in our community. Many positive things about it. We'll have some short-term impacts without a doubt. We'll do our best to mitigate those. But in the long run, we anticipate this being a huge benefit to the community, cleaning up polluted groundwater, eliminating fish kills, creating assets for our community that will last for the long term, not only benefiting our health, but benefiting our economic well-being here as well. So that's the conclusion of this presentation. Thanks very much. Bye-bye.